Hello everybody, Andy here, and today I want to talk to you about solo/co-op kill team. Obviously coming from the Hivestorm box. First things first, GW sent me all of this, so thanks to them. But they don't get to see what I say before I say it, blah blah blah. Cool, right. Confirmation that I bought and paid for. Let's talk about solo/co-op. So if you are coming from the last edition of Kill Team, you might be wondering, where is narrative? Narrative is gone. There is no longer a Necromunda style growing of your teams, because clearly the Kill Team designers saw Necromunda and said, we kind of have Kill Team and we've kind of given it like a Necromunda style campaign and growing thing, but as a company we already have Necromunda. Why are we doing Necromunda but worse? And if you're doing Necromunda but worse, whew, damn, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, instead they've taken that out and they've replaced it with kind of three things. Firstly is solo, secondly is co-op, thirdly is, what are they called? Mission packs. So I want to talk about all of these things. And I'm going to start off by saying that, because I'm going to say a lot of things, but I do want to make it very clear right at the front that regardless of what I say and the impressions I may give across, I do think that all of these are really good. I think that solo is awesome as kind of an alternative way to play, or for many, the only way they will end up playing, and that's brilliant. The more people that can actually play the game, the better. Co-op is brilliant, I think, for a whole bunch of things that I'm going to talk about in a moment, but just as primarily as a way to teach other people, I think it's perfect, because you can apply a sort of logic process that is in no way competitive and combative, and that's really brilliant to see being promoted in the core book itself. And then you've got the mission packs, which are not really a campaign. They are just a series of linked missions, in the same way that you could play through the approved ops mission card deck and just say, hey, these missions are linked, right? Like, there's not actually anything more to it than that, except they have slightly funkier objectives and deployments. That's pretty much it. But of course, before we launch into this fully, I would like to quickly give a subscriber only benefit, and that subscriber only benefit is a big double hello. Wow, so wholesome. Obviously I need to start thinking, is it no longer a double hello? Is it an accurate 2 hello? I don't know. Drop a comment. Double hello or accurate 2 hello? Anyway, that was subscriber only, so have a good one. Right, let's dive into the meat and potatoes of this kidney pie. What am I saying? So let's talk about the crunch of these things, and before I get to like just pure subjective opinion. So the crunch of solo and co-op is missions, AI, threat. What we're talking about here is how the game mechanically works. What stops this game from just being a single line of text in the core book saying, you know, you can play against yourself, right? That's kind of what solo is, right? Except the way they're putting it to you is that there's different type of NPOs, which are non-player operatives, and they have different ways of treating threat when it comes to what they should do, and you can be a marksman or you can be a melee guy, and depending on which type you are, you have a different AI decision tree to kind of guide those actions. So for example, the marksman never ever, no matter what they want to do, make a melee action. They will always fall back first. If they've fallen back, they will shoot. If they can't shoot, they will move till they can shoot. And they will never, under any circumstances, attempt to melee. Whereas the melee guys don't even have a pistol. They will always attempt to charge. Well, they will attempt to fight. If they can't fight, they will try and charge and fight. If they can't charge, they will try to move into cover closer to the closest enemy operative, right? These are very, very simple decision-making trees, and I think that's totally fine. Simplicity makes total sense in this instance when you're trying to come up with a series of logic rules that will guide players through this game. So this totally works for me. The threat principle, you can read the page. Don't bother. Let me tell you what the threat principle is. It's very, very simple. Do the worst thing for you. Okay? So on the enemy turn, when you're deciding what should they do, should they shoot this model here or this model here, you want to think to yourself, well, I know that on my turn, I was planning on doing this. Therefore, it would be a real issue to my plans if the enemy shot this guy. That's kind of the way you want to think about it. The other slightly less kind of brain rigmarole that you can go through here is you've got two models. One of them's in cover, one of them's not in cover. Which one's the enemy shooting? The one not in cover, right? Because you will logically do more damage to that model. The threat principle boils down to what is the worst thing the enemy can do for my team? There you go. Very simple, very overarching. I like it. These are good things. I do have criticisms. In fact, relatively major criticisms, but they're going to come a little bit later. We then also have the missions. So when it comes to the missions in the Joint Ops mission pack and the core rulebook, you get 3. You get kill the enemy team, you get action on objectives, and then you get run away. I'm going to say that for your first game of Kill Team ever, just do the deathmatch. Just play whichever team gets tabled first wins. That's fine. However, never play that again. I think it's very boring. It's not really how Kill Team should be played, etc, etc. Now with that said, obviously, maybe some people love it. Maybe some people do want to play that solo game because they don't want to think and they are literally just killing time until something else happens. However, I actually think, I also am not a huge fan of the run off the board mission. I think the second mission, I think it's called Secure, where you have to move up, the enemy respawns on the side of the maps, and you have to action on 3 objectives, and if you manage to action on the 3 objectives before the enemy kills you, you win. I think that's really fun. I think that actually is a great representation of what Kill Team as a game is. You're trying to action on points, you need to kill the enemy to be able to action on those points. It actually, I think, teaches the game of Kill Team incredibly well, whereas just kill everyone and just run off the board are kind of a bit weird and funky. I've been playing Kill Team in various iterations for 6 years. We're going into the 7th year at this point, and let me tell you this. Sometimes I have refused to play games with people because I just don't feel like it. I and most people do wargaming to make friends. As soon as you put 2 people across the table from each other and put the core mechanics of a game in between them, you very quickly find out whether or not they're people you like, which is a good thing, I suppose. It's a good filter, or a funnel maybe in some way. But sometimes I don't want that. I just want to have fun. And inevitably, for me and who I am, if I'm opposing someone that I can then blame for the problems of the game, I'm probably going to be a little bit of a bitch, if I'm honest. So, something that I quite like is co-op play. And the reason I like it is because I can play with somebody instead of against somebody. Because it's just relaxing, and I think that games are supposed to be relaxing and are supposed to foster a sense of camaraderie instead of opposition. Now, obviously, you can push through a competitive game and bond over the game itself after the fact, but I don't make any friends during the game. I don't like people when I'm playing against them during the game. In fact, I hate them somewhat. Just throwing it out them, you know. And if I hate someone more than I hate myself, that's probably a bad sign. Now, this is, of course, purely my personality, but I'm pretty sure that that's not too uncommon, right? You put me in that competitive, head-to-head, you are my opponent kind of perspective, I'm not gonna like you. Why would I like people that are actively trying to stop what I'm doing? This seems very simple to me, but whatever, fine. I think I would make friends easier in a co-op version where we are playing together. And I think that Kill Team and wargaming in general, not having that is just an own goal, as Peachy would say, I suppose. It's just a big miss. Why would you not allow people to play together? Well, now, co-op exists. And I think, if I'm honest, pretty damn good. There you go. I like, not just to teach new players the game, I think it's brilliant for that, but I think people already knew it would be brilliant for that. But I think it could be fun as its own thing. I think you could be a PvE multiplayer kill teamer. I think you could play this game and you could be really, really good at the game and never ever play against somebody else. There you go. So I definitely hope that people take co-op and make it not its own thing, it's already its own thing, but view it as its own thing, just as equal as PvP, if you want to view it that way. Because I think that very genuinely, it's something that has been missing from wargaming for far too long. Why would we make this oppositional? Okay, anyway, I think I've jerked it off enough. Let's talk about some negatives. And I do want to say that based on what I just said, it's actually really hard to discuss the negatives of a game where there is no enemy. So this doesn't have to be balanced. I think that versus games, PvP games, have to have a baseline balance to be a good game. Like, objectively, that is a requirement of those games. However, if you're playing co-op, who cares? Just talk to your friend, not your opponent, your friend, and say, hey, let's make this a hard one. Or, I'm not overly fussed. Let's, you can make most of the decisions and tell me what to roll. Let's have an easy one. And if you're both vibing it, you can do either. And you know what? Even if your opponent says, actually, I want a really tricky one, let's ramp up the difficulty, and you're not feeling it, cool. You could just backseat it. You say, oh yeah, cool. And not roll any dice and just have a fun game. And so I'm about to criticize the rules of solo and co-op and the missions. But you have to understand, that's like saying, oh, Mordheim and Necromunda are unbalanced games and require house ruling. It's like, okay, well, firstly, one is straight up said in the core rulebook that it's not a balanced game, and one of them is a dead game, literally. Hasn't existed for 20 years. Who cares if it's a house rule? That's fine. They're not real games. Just house rule it. It's not even a criticism that you need to house rule cooperative games. But of course, because the last edition of Kill Team was so, in my opinion, anti-casual, I think it's fair that a lot of people coming into this are going to be focusing on the PvP aspect and looking to play versus other people, against them instead of with them. So we do need to look at the core rules, which, in fairness, is how most people are going to come into this game, certainly for their first one, as they flick through the rulebook before they decide what they would actually like from solo and co-op. I'm going to start with my absolute biggest negative, and that is, there is no initiative system. I like initiative systems in general. I think they should be in more games. I think they're very cool. I've played X-Wing. You're never going to convince me that initiative isn't a great thing. However, because there is no initiative system that ever forces your hand as the person that ultimately is the one deciding what the NPOs do, means that ultimately, when you boil it down, you are just playing yourself. Your decision thinking is never ever limited, and I do think that is probably the biggest negative of solo and co-op. Yeah, it's actually really unfortunate, because don't get me wrong, it would be very, very, very easy to add in, but if it's not in the core book, then the messaging just isn't there. It's going to be this weird offshoot that you can do if you fancy it, which I would thoroughly recommend because it's so easy to implement. But if it's not the official way to play, a lot of people aren't going to play it. A lot of people will never go beyond the core book. They will never look at the core rules and say, actually, I don't think this is good for me. I want to change it. They will just say, oh, this sucks. I'm going to play one of the other 24 miniature games or board games that I have lying around. Which are just straight up better at solo and co-op, you know? So I do think it's a big mistake. Now, what do I mean by that? Quite simply, when you are deciding what to do as the NPO, you get to decide which model activates. To decide which model you activate, you first have to decide what you, as your team, wants to do. So you think, okay, right, well, I want to shoot this next turn. Or I want to comms this, and then back to the enemy, and then back to me, and then I will do this. Right, so you have to think 2 or 3, even 4 turns ahead, which actually is brilliant for teaching the game, let's be clear. But when it comes to just feeling like an experience in and of itself, it's terrible, because you are just playing yourself. You could just mind palace the whole thing, and that's kind of what you have to do. However, if there was a single mechanic on the enemy team that you, as the player, could not foresee, it would completely change the game. At the moment, when you line up your team here and the NPOs here, you have perfect information. You never need to do anything. You could just say, oh, you know what? The NPOs are going to win. And you probably wouldn't be too far off the truth. Maybe some dice would get crazy, perhaps, but there is nothing that can happen in the game that isn't just dice being bad. If you were to play with just statistical averages of your dice, you would be able to say from deployment who would win the game. If you then had a single blocking factor added to the game, like initiative, where something else, another mechanic decides which enemy gets to activate, suddenly the game has to be played. You are no longer playing yourself. Even though you get to decide what the logical action should be for that model that must now activate, maybe that isn't the best move for the NPOs. Maybe that isn't, or maybe that is the best move, in which case great. This would be so simple. In Darktide, the board game, every single operative had its own card, so you would draw from the initiative deck. And when you drew out your card, your model, that would activate. You could do that, obviously, if you want to homebrew that in, but you could get a very similar effect from just, say, rolling a d6. So if you're facing elites, you just roll a d6. You don't even need to number them to clarify. You can say, okay, I will always do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, going from this end of the board, going this way, and that's just the number of the operative. So, and then if I roll a 2, I go 1, 2, oh, that one's activated, just keep going up in the order system. So, okay, 3, okay, number 3 activates. If 3 is activated, 4 activates. And you don't need to number them, just left to right, simple. You can roll a d6 if you're going elite, you can roll a d12 if you've got normals, and a d20 if you've got hordes, right? Super simple. That single blocking factor would completely change the game. And I think that not being in solo/co-op is just a huge miss. I think that as it's played right now, solo/co-op can only be a teaching game. I don't think it can be its own game in its own right. There you go. And that is obviously a pretty bad thing for everything that I said is good about the game at the start. It's great for teaching. That is a fact, obviously. It's great for getting better at the game. But that's not why I like it. That's cool, but that's not what it is or should be. Sorry, it is what it is, but it isn't what it should be. Now, again, just house rule it. Cool, easy, done. That's fine. Maybe you need to add in a few more models because the NPOs are going to be making more subpar moves, but that's fine. Not a big deal. Or, of course, NPOs are generic models. You could use your compendium teams. You could use whatever. I used a mixture of my scouts and marines, my strike force Justian there. Sorry, they're angels of death now. You could say, actually, I want to play against Nemesis Claw, and you can just play Nemesis Claw. When it comes to the AI tree, it's great that it's there, it needs to be there. When it comes to threat principle, it's great that it's there, it needs to be there. But after your first game, you will never ever read those pages again. You just know what the models do, right? Because you're playing yourself, ultimately. And you either shoot things or you fight things. That's it. NPOs never tap objectives, they just try to kill the enemy. With you. Which is fine. That's great. That's how it should be. But because it's so simple, it also means you don't need to follow the NPO generation. You don't need to follow the AI trees. You don't need to follow the threat principle. You can play any team against any team. So if I wanted to play Nemesis Claw, I could play Nemesis Claw into whatever team I want. And I could, read their data sheet and say, oh, okay, this skin thief, whatever, can do this ability. Cool. I'm going to use that ability on his data card because it's very easy once you have that initiative system in place to just play what is directly in front of you. And you don't have to mind palace the whole game. Okay, right, sorry, I'm going to move on. However, as it stands, solo co-op could be a single line in this book saying, you're allowed to do this, right? They just forgot to put in any sort of mechanic that stops you from just making crap up. There are absolutely no restrictions, and house rolling out restrictions makes sense. House rolling in restrictions is probably a failure in game design. Just throwing it out there. And you know, like, go and play this yourself. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you love that you're learning to get better at the game, and the way you do that the most effectively is by fully playing 2 teams. But if you're just fully playing 2 regular teams, you don't need the rulebook. You don't need this format. You're just sad hammering, which is fine. But solo/co-op is not sad hammering. And then just very briefly talking about the missions from, you know, the Airborne Assault mission pack in the dossier. I think they're great. They look really good. And I personally am excited to play through them, to play through that campaign solo/co-op. To me, that sounds so much more fun and interesting and intuitive than playing anything else solo/co-op. Much like in the core book, we have preliminary missions, the preliminary ops. I think that the Joint Ops mission pack is the first thing you play as you learn solo co-op, and then you go to the real missions and you play through those because they are far more interesting narratively. But these seem fun and it's a linked campaign, but there's nothing in these that make me think, ooh, I really want to play those against someone. No, I think that this game is pushing for a much clearer delineation between, if you're competitive, if you're PvP, play approved ops. Go over there. You cringe lords, you edge lords, get away from us. Cool guys. If you want to play joint ops, if you want to be bros, if you want to be bros with yourself, obviously that's fine too. You know, self-love, that's great. You can play these fun missions that are like actually fun, and you can actually have fun. And like, games are meant to be fun, did you know that? Or you can hate the person you're playing against, or you can have fun. You know, luckily I'm not biased about these things, so that's really good. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about solo co-op. Can I say, this feels like the way that I would probably rather play the game than competitive. I've never really been a tournament player. I would rather play with someone across the table from me, bonding like a knife, bonding knife, like a true Grey Vaser with a friend, instead of quite genuinely kind of hating them for a bit, you know, and then trying to be an adult and mature about it and say, oh no, I don't hate you actually, that's, you know, that's fine. I'm really happy that you rolled 4 6s. That's a really fun thing, isn't it? Ooh, tickle me pink, love it. Great game, superb. Yeah, that's my review of solo co-op. I'm super happy about solo and co-op. And because there's no one against me to have any feels bads when I do my own custom rules, I'm just going to use an initiative system. I think that the fact there is no initiative system is bizarre, but fine. Whatever, I'll just do what I enjoy. There you go. And if someone is willing to play co-op, then they're probably willing to play with an initiative system. So I don't think it'll ever be an issue. Cool, well thanks for watching. Hey, if you made it to the end of the video, I'd like to give you a big triple hello. Wow, so wholesome. Don't forget to leave that comment. Are you solo, are you co-op, or a fucking loser?